I've been saying for a long time that I was going to get to a playthrough of Transport Fever 2, developed by Urban Games here. Urban Games' third title, Transport Fever 2, was released in December 2019. And I bought it pretty early on, and I've been meaning to do a review of it ever since. It's partly the inspiration for all the other reviews and playthroughs I've been doing of its predecessors. It's my favorite, it's the most developed, it's the least incomplete, and it can trace its ancestry back to Train Fever, of course. I have other videos detailing Train Fever and its history, about how Urban Games was effectively founded through crowdfunding, through Gambitious, or Gamebitious, I think you probably are supposed to pronounce this, who ended up being the official publisher. One change in Transport Fever 2, if we jump over to the Wikipedia page here, is that it was actually released by Good Shepherd. So it's the first game in the Transport Fever series which is not released by Gamebitious. But the original budget for Train Fever was 250,000 euros, which sounds like a lot, but a really nice game is sometimes rather expensive to develop. This is the official website of Transport Fever 2, because Urban Games have dedicated websites for each of their games. As I said, they were founded to develop Train Fever, and that has led to the Fever series, and this remains the primary thing that they work on. If we jump back to their website, games, you look at their list of games, so far everything is the Fever series. Train Fever, Transport Fever, and Transport Fever 2. Now, this is a nice website, actually. The screenshots are cool, everything's cool, I think. They have a wiki built into it, one of many wikis about Transport Fever 2 actually on the internet. And it's not a terrible website, but I also don't think it's the best website about the game on the internet. That's usually how it is. Usually the companies are not the producers of the best websites about their games. For example, the Steam page is very good, in my opinion. I think the reviews are a little bit funny in a certain way. Because one of the things about Steam is that if you do a review, it says the number of hours you played the game. So this person, remember that this game was released in December of 2019. This person has 2,408 hours on record. To put that in perspective, and this was 2,395.8 hours at the review time on the 9th of May. Now, to become an airline pilot in the United States, you need to have 2,500 hours of jet time. That's not their total flight time, because the flight time is usually closer to 4,000. But this gives you an idea of how many hours this person plays games. Because this probably isn't their only game. That's incredible. Like 2,408 hours since 2019 on one game. And then if we jump down, they're not the only one. This person, who did a review on the 8th of May, when they had 2,090 hours, says, tried it for a few hours, seems to be pretty good. So this person considers 2,090 hours a few hours. And a lot of other people are really serious about it too. 494 hours, and so on. 569 hours. And generally the reviews are pretty good. And note that the bad reviews are mostly from people who haven't tried it with any seriousness. Like this person only has half an hour on it. So anyway, I have around 243 hours as of making this. They recommend 16 gig of RAM. The reason for that is that the maps, if you want to go over the standard large size, which does involve a slight hack on the game, you need basically 16 for it to run smoothly, just because the amount of processing that it has to do is more than just the processor. They need to have that much data for circulating around in the computer, and 8 gig, which is the minimum, which is actually what I have, isn't quite enough for that. Having said that, I have run the specs of my computer through certain websites that tell you whether you can run a given game, and all of them have said I can't run Transport Fever 2. And I have run every kind of map in Transport Fever 2 except for the very largest, the megalomaniac size map. I've never tried that, but everything up to the step below that, the huge or 20 by 20 kilometer map. If you do everything up to the large size map with 8 gig of RAM, and actually an i7, I don't have an i5, I have an i7 quad core. And, decent graphics card. I have 2 graphics cards, which probably helps me. Then you can run it. It's not as much of a system hog as you would expect it to be, given that it's very pretty. So if we jump to the screenshots, do we have screenshots here? Well, if I were signed in, I would have screenshots. I guess I can't access the screenshots without signing in, I guess. Hardly matters. This is a very visually attractive game, as you'll see in the playthrough. And it just had an update on May 10th. They've had yearly updates on it since last year. And I'll get to those in a minute. This is the Wikipedia wiki, the official Wikipedia page. It's not actually as big as some of the Wikipedia pages about gaming. My own view is that Wikipedia's gaming pages are usually very, very good. But strangely, even though the Fever series is very, very popular, their Wikipedia entries for them, they're pretty basic. It does point out that you could get Transport Fever 2 for Linux long before you could get it for macOS. Although, maybe the reason for the delay is the fact that if you have a Mac, until recently at least, you could run Boot Camp on it. So, you can run Windows games on a Mac in that way. They do recommend Ubuntu Linux, by the way. I did a little bit of research on that yesterday. And you generally want to have Ubuntu if you're going to run it in Linux. I was considering doing the playthrough in Linux, but then I thought, I've never played Transport Fever 2 in Linux before, and I don't know how that will go. I have played it quite a lot in Windows 10. Windows 10 is fine for Transport Fever 2. And then we have one of the third-party wikis here, Fandom. Fandom do a lot of games wikis, many of them very, very good. Actually, just for example, the most obvious choice, Minecraft. Oh, this wiki. I was going to say, did the search wrong. Okay. So we jump over to Minecraft, and I've used this Minecraft wiki quite a lot for my Minecraft adventures. I'm speaking generally, not of any feature of the game. And yeah, the Minecraft section of this is very, very nice. But we're not talking about Minecraft today. So then I guess I will have to go over what has changed since the original Transport Fever, because that is probably what you want to know mostly, other than just watching a game being played. So here we are at the introductory page as of May 2022. They're showing off their new update for May 10th. They're giving a very, very short summary of the improvements. So towns can now demand 6 types of cargo instead of just 2. And new industries can be founded on the map as the game progresses, and abandoned industries will disappear after some time. That's a little bit more like Railroad Tycoon, for example, especially Railroad Tycoon 2. I don't know if I like that very much, but that's a realism feature. And you can customize financial and town growth factors with the advanced game options. And you can select a preferred lane for road waypoints. You could use buoys as waypoints for ship lines. It didn't used to have buoys at all, not even as assets. And you can align the platform length to the length of the stopping trains although I have not figured out how to get that to work yet. And some of the stuff, like alternative terminals at stations to handle multiple vehicles on one line at the same time, I have configured that. It works pretty well. And they're saying expand the capacity of stations with modular buildings for passengers and cargo. You could always add modular buildings in Transport Fever 2. It was one of the improvements over Transport Fever, because Transport Fever, if you placed a station, you specified the size of the station and the number of platforms and so on, but you didn't get to decide how it was set up, like where the buildings would go, where the platforms would go, and so on. And in Transport Fever 2, the support for expanding your station into whatever you want it to be is really nice. The catch was that until the May update, adding buildings didn't really increase your storage capacity. Your storage was determined by your platforms. Now you can store stuff in the buildings, which is really nice, especially for, of course, the cargo stations. Another huge improvement in the May update is you can build bus stations now and truck terminals. A truck terminal or a bus station is no longer just a parking area, whatever you'd call it, loading docks or whatever. You can actually have a proper bus station, which in real life, I don't usually travel by long-distance bus, but in Transport Fever and Transport Fever 2, road vehicles are part of the game. So if you can have proper stations for your buses and trucks, that's very handy. And you can sound the vehicle horn in the cockpit camera. That's new. It's a little bit surprising they didn't have that already. And you can add whistle posts on the railway tracks, which would be useful for American scenarios because in America, trains blow long, long, short, long, approaching a crossing. And they say use custom colors to set vehicle or line color. You can already do that in Transport Fever 1. I think they're getting a little ahead of themselves there. I've used that feature for as long as I've had Transport Fever 2. And you can save loads a list of mods. That's true. You can do a preset of your mods. That's nice. And they've done bug fixes. Well, that's a given. And I'll get into the other improvements later. But I figured this was worth going over because they are giving a pretty nice summary of what they did to improve Transport Fever 2 this time. It seems they're holding off on Transport Fever 3, actually. So what I wanted to show first was the credits. This is one of the only places where you can find the development team's names. They're kind of invisible on the internet. People say that you can find out anything on the internet, but that's not really always true. There's the development team. You can see the lead programmer is Urban Weber, who, if I understand correctly, is the brother of Basil Weber. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Urban Weber is the person for whom Urban Games is named. Because Urban means more things than a name, of course. So it's a cool name. That development team, I looked up all their names, and that is almost exactly the same team as the one that worked on Transport Fever 1, including David Langard here, whose stage name is Admiral James T. He's the music composer. I have the music shut off here because I want to talk, but I'll switch the music back on later at minimal volume. I guess the honest thing to say about Transport Fever 2, just to start out with, I'm talking about all the nice things that they've added in the May update and all the nice things that they've added from Transport Fever 1. I'll get to those in a minute. There are a lot of things they still have neglected, which I'm a little bit disappointed by. Like, for example, you can't really play against opponents, not in the free game anyway. There's no stock market, naturally, because there are no other companies. And you're also not allowed to purchase industries, at least not in the unmodded stock game. And that's something that Railroad Tycoon 2 has, at least, and Railroad Tycoon 3 as well, that you don't have in Transport Fever 2, which is a disappointment. There are also still only 3 historical eras, which is kind of odd for the culture surrounding the vehicles in your industry, because we're talking about the time frame 1850 to the present. And there were a lot more than 3 areas of clothing styles and everything else during that time, so that's a little bit awkward. Also, they've not added proper American buildings yet, or Asian buildings, even though they added Asian vehicles in this version, which is an improvement. And I'm a little bit disappointed by that. You have them in the campaign scenarios, but not actually in the free games, and I haven't been able to activate the campaign buildings in the map editor. There's probably a way to do that, but I haven't found it yet. And it would be nice to have more American and Asian buildings in addition to the European ones, because whatever people say, America looks very different from Europe, usually. People say, oh, it's all copied from Europe. No, it's not. And it's a little bit of a shame, but I still enjoy the game immensely in spite of that. Another thing I would have liked to have seen in this update, whether we're talking about Transport Fever 2 or the May update, is helicopters. You still don't have helicopters. And helicopters would be much more useful than airplanes in this game because of the short distances. The idea of putting airplanes into it is always a little bit dubious to me, because the distances just aren't long enough for airplanes. I also would like to see dedicated rights-of-way for trams. Having said that, I have downloaded workshop content that allows me to do that. But in the stock game, you don't get that, nor do you get maglev. Although I think there are add-ons you can get through the workshop for maglev. I think. I don't have them, but I think you can get them. Another thing is that they haven't modeled the maintenance of the vehicles in the way that was done in Railroad Tycoon 2 and a lot of games like that, Railway Empire for that matter. So if you have steam locomotives, you don't need any water towers at all. And that's kind of a realism deficiency. Basically, maintenance costs are entirely down to money. Nothing has to stop at any particular time. You just pour money into your vehicles, and that keeps them running. You don't even need the depots except to build them. And there are even ways of getting around that, like cloning vehicles, for example. And partly for that reason, you can't construct support buildings, but that also includes hotels and restaurants and resorts and shopping districts, which could actually help make your stations more successful or develop a town more quickly. You can't actually do that. There may be add-ons you can get that'll let you do it, but not in the stock game. You also don't have weather, you don't have a day and night cycle, even though those are kind of frivolous things in this game. And then you can't produce campaign scenarios with the basic map editor. There may be third-party software you can get for that. I already talked about the lack of any ability to place the assets available in the campaigns. Actually, the campaigns, I have neglected these really badly, so maybe if we look at the game features I haven't looked at before, I should start with those. So if we start with the campaign scenarios, I've actually experimented with
Mankind is constantly creating amazing new inventions. Get involved in rapid technological progress and ensure smoothly running transportation in different regions of the world.
So they have the narrators. So they have campaigns for Era 1, Era 2, and Era 3. I haven't started 2 or 3 yet. I have completed 1. And it was fun. I don't like these as much as I like the campaigns in Railroad Tycoon 2. They're nowhere close to historically accurate in the same way, even though, in terms of the general historical context, they're accurate. I'll show you some exceptions here. We select Era 1.
It's the dawning of the 20th century. The major powers of Europe are in the process of divvying up the last fragments of the world map among themselves. At long last, the German Empire wants a place where it can bask in the limelight too. It sees its chance along the Bosporus, where temperamental Sultan Abdul Hamid II rules over a vast territory. Time for the Germans to secure the biggest infrastructure project in all of Asia Minor.
This scenario that he's describing is the most realistic, probably, of all of these. and the most connected to real life. And it's interesting that they chose this particular project. This was a real-life project to build a railway between Berlin and Baghdad in the early 20th century. I started a university paper on this back when I was a history major. Never finished it because I had other things that were better for getting the grade, as it turned out. And my professor thought that I didn't really have enough material for it. But it was a very interesting thing to research. And this is a pretty realistic scenario. These others are mostly not. Like the Trans-Siberian one, sort of, that's pretty good too, if I were going to really defend it, because that was a real project that everybody knows about, much better known than Berlin to Baghdad. And it was also finished, which is pretty significant, because the Berlin to Baghdad was one of these things like the Cape to Cairo, you know. It was extremely ambitious and was only just barely completed at the beginning of World War II after being begun before World War I. And there still are no through services to Baghdad. The other campaign scenarios are much more about general developments around the world. They're not as true to life. But I still prefer the free game, as I was saying. I think that these campaigns are nice to have. I really liked them in Railroad Tycoon 2. This I'm less enthusiastic about. There's also the map editor. I have experimented with this a little bit, but like I said, it's kind of basic, actually. The map editor, I'm not sure if it even makes sense to look at it, but the map editor, you can basically set up maps with towns where you want them, basically, roads where you want them, and have, terrain either auto-generated or built by hand to your liking. So, I guess that this would appeal to a lot of people. But it's hard to use, and there's not a lot of flexibility in it. I would argue that there are many other transport strategy games that have better ones. I think including Railroad Tycoon 2, actually. Especially because Railroad Tycoon 2 allows you to add events. Events exist in Transport Fever 2 in the campaign scenarios, but I haven't figured out a way to add events in the map editor. It's just not as versatile as Railroad Tycoon 2 or 3, which is a shame. I wish it weren't like that. And what else is there to say? Well, the soundtrack is new. I haven't switched it on yet, but the music from Admiral James T. is all new, even though it's still him producing it. And there are a lot of new building models, even though, like I said, they're all European. There is a movable camera in the cockpit view, which I'll show you in the playthrough. There are wild animals running around. There are, like I mentioned earlier, the modular stations, which are really great. They give you a great deal more versatility in where you can fit a station and what you can use it for. There are Asian vehicles, if you want them, without any add-ons. You have much improved modeling of freight demand in the cities. The publicity says you now have 4 choices of cargo, but I found you actually have 6. You have a lot more road types. It's much easier to build proper modern highways. Whatever you think of modern highways. You can build them in this game with cloverleaf junctions and everything else that you would ever want. They're not very fast. The speed limit only goes up to 100k with the built-in road types. There are higher speed Autobahn type roads that you can get as workshop content. But even the basic stuff is very much improved from the original Transport Fever. You can even manually place your traffic lights, just like on the railways. So that's really nice. The layers are more sophisticated. Like, for example, the layers now include an emissions layer, which affects the quality of life in your cities, which affects economic growth. There are a huge number of vehicles added, even though I could still add more. I think everybody who's into the history of transport can think of endless things to add. But for example, they added a whole bunch of aircraft. So now you can get a cargo super constellation. You can get a whole bunch of cargo aircraft that didn't exist before, actually. like C-47s, for example. And they added 2 steam road vehicles. They chose to call them steam trucks this time instead of steam lorries, as in Transport Fever 1. That's a little bit more useful. You can actually use the steam vehicles more seriously. In total, they added 17 aircraft, including the cargo aircraft, 11 horse-drawn vehicles, 37 trucks, 6 buses, 26 locomotives, 5 heavy rail multiple units, 13 different kinds of tram, 3 of which are horse-drawn, and 6 additional boats and ships. Also, this is very significant, they did a June update. In addition to the May update this year, they did a June update in 2021 where you could add maximum and minimum waiting time, especially for freight trains that's useful, and ships where it takes a long time to load them. Also, the vehicles, line stations, and so on can be named in the line manager. So there's a lot of overlap between the different editors for different routes and so on, vehicles and everything. You can edit trains as they are. That's handy. So you don't have to send everything back to the depot. And you can even repaint if you want. And you have filters for the vehicles when you're purchasing them. That would be more useful if you have a lot of workshop content, I would imagine. Like if you have immense numbers of vehicles. You also have a lot of different tools for especially upgrading roads and railways. It saves you a lot of time. And what else? You have suspension bridges. Those are nice. Those were added in the June update, along with cable-stayed bridges. And you also have color reset as of the June update. So, nice. Also, you have the May update, which I already mentioned. So, improved support for station platforms. Like, for example, you could add a building to increase the capacity, which is really significant. And yeah, I guess that's everything I can talk about. I've been making you stare at this thing the whole time and not actually demonstrating a game. So I guess the next thing to do would be to do what I've done with the other versions of Transport Fever and Train Fever, which is to do a free game and try to work to the point where I'm making a profit. I think that's the way to go, because that's what I've done with all the other games in the transport simulation, or not really simulation, transport business or transport strategy genre so far, this long series I've been doing. And of course, one of the things you can't tell just by looking at this is how nice the graphics are, because the graphics are incrementally improved from Transport Fever 1. And since the original Transport Fever had pretty nice graphics, you can imagine how nice these are. I'm not actually going to crank them up all the way because my computer only has 8 gig of RAM, but I will try to make it look nice for you. Now, what I almost forgot to talk about was the mature game, because if I just do a basic playthrough of Transport Fever 2, you're barely going to see anything within the game. And, of course, when I did the other playthroughs, I did this also. I took a look at a mature game, late in the game, with all the later vehicles and with a pretty well-developed transport network. And so I'm going to do that here, too. I did actually have some trouble achieving this. I played some games, to the end so that I could specifically have games to do this with. And the best one, which was my 9th ever game in Transport Fever 2, turned out not to work because I don't have enough RAM on my system to actually run it. I said before that 8 gigabytes of RAM is generally enough to run this game, even though they say it's not, for the full features. But it is usually. Where I ran into trouble was I was using experimental map sizes because they have the very large, huge, and megalomaniac maps as options. And these are a lot of fun, but you need to basically have the 16 gig or more of RAM. Because if you don't have the RAM, the computer can't really load the maps properly. And my sense is this isn't even a graphics card issue. This is just an issue of having too many objects. And the reason I say that is I did 2 very large map sizes, so it's only the smallest of the experimental map sizes. And it was still too large once I got a lot of objects onto the map. If I didn't have a lot of objects on the map, it could just barely run if I cranked the graphics settings way down. And it would run fine if I were not streaming video. This is the thing. Of course, this isn't really streaming, it's recording off the screen. It's screencasting. But running both Open Broadcaster and the game was impossible on the 9th game because it was just too well developed. The 8th game, which I didn't have anywhere close to the same success with, will run because it's not as developed. I was not as successful. Although, as you will see, that's the one I'm going to do. And it's actually perfectly streamable if you crank the graphics settings down. That's the thing. So that also means that I've actually skipped how to activate the experimental map sizes. So the experimental map sizes are activated this way. You go into OS, Program File, Steam, User Data, your user number, then the number of the game, and then the folder local. That's your directory path. And here's your settings file. You have to manually change this. You can't change this in-game. And it's a Lua file. And you can open this with any text editor used for programming, but you can also open it with Notepad. And I'll show you something else cool about the newest version of Notepad here. If we open Notepad, if you look down at the bottom of Notepad, the newer versions will tell you what line you're on. So that's handy for this so that you can navigate down. The necessary line of code is not too hard to find, but just for reference, it is line 39. See that? Down at the bottom. So experimental map sizes has to be marked to true. And this is very nice if you're not making a video. If you are making a video, you need extra RAM. 8 gig is not enough. And I learned that the hard way. As you'll see, this video is not going to be very clear. It's going to be very fuzzy compared with the rest of this playthrough. If you have a question about this, experimental mailbox, I was wondering about this myself. I have not tried this. I've looked this up online and I can't get any information about it. My sense is that this is either a mail carrying function, in which case I don't know what kind of vehicles they have, whether they're specialized vehicles or whether you use the existing vehicles. And I also don't know if this just might be a scenery asset that they're experimenting with that looks a lot nicer than the basic mailboxes, because there are mailboxes in the game as scenery assets. The problem is that there's no mail simulated yet, like in Transport Tycoon and some of these other games. It is a little bit strange that it's not included in the game, because just about all the other transport strategy games that I know of have it, as does the Railroad Tycoon series as well. Anyway, I will now look at the mature game, the 8th one, with the very large map size, but with not a lot of development. So that would mean, by extension, that the experimental map size runs just because it's not well developed. The game was not as successful as my 9th one. So we'll see how it goes. So here it is, my 8th game in Transport Fever 2. in the year 2022. And I have a Duo Stocks multiple unit in the platform there, but I'm going to look at the other cities here. These cities, as you can see, are not very well developed because I didn't have great success in this game, but the very large map size is very large. And I really wish that I had enough RAM to do this properly because I did have great success on the 9th game. There's just a lot of freight to transport, a lot of passengers to transport, and so it's really nice. Now if we look at the cities menu there, my largest city is, it's actually Epping. And if we look at Epping, Epping is developed, but not as developed as the biggest cities in my 9th game. I wish I could show you the 9th game, but I don't have enough RAM. But I have some skyscrapers there, you know, but it's not as developed as these cities can get. And most of those are apartment buildings, actually. If we look at the second largest city, Wembley, Wembley actually has more impressive buildings, even though the population, as you can see, is really not the same. So if we jump to Wembley here, there's that skyscraper there, which is taller than any other one in this particular game. That's just an apartment building. But it's a well-developed city. It's just not as developed as it could be. I didn't completely botch this game, but I also didn't do extremely well either. So here's my list of vehicles, and it reflects a game which is okay but not amazing. So I have all my trains listed here, and I have an ICE there, which I will ride along with here. This seemed like the given way to show off the graphics of this. It's a little bit choppy, even with my cranking the graphics way down. As I said, I need more RAM, basically. But, looks nice, in spite of that. One thing about the Transport Fever maps is that, compared to real life, they are very small, so getting a high-speed train up to speed, even with the unrealistically fast acceleration, is very hard to do. You basically need the very large maps to even approach the cruising speed of these trains. Generally just ends up being zooming up as fast as you can go and then slamming on the brakes most of the time. Even on some of the very large maps, including this one. Because you can see the train is approaching 210 kilometers per hour, so now it's in high-speed running. But it's only going to be at high-speed running for a few seconds, and it's not going to reach the full 250 kilometers per hour that an ICE-1 is designed to do. 231, 232, 233, 234, 235, 236, and so on. And it's... oh, I froze there. So it's up to into the 240s there, and then it has to slam on the brakes for the station. And this is a pure express, non-stop service, and it still can't do it. But it is faster than anything else. If I put a conventional train that just can go 200 kilometers per hour on this, it'll do the run just fine, but it will not do anything impressive speed-wise. It'll just do the 200k and won't get there as fast. And you won't make as much money either. Although you don't want to run these high-speed trains unless you can run them well over 200, because the expenses then exceed any benefit of having them. So there are the people models coming into the station. And let's see what else we got here. Other vehicles. Well, I can go with one of the Skoda. I don't think these are actually 03Ts. These are the export of the 03T. The Skoda 10T. The Skoda 03, 05, and 10Ts were built between 1998 and 2005. The 10Ts ended up in Portland, Oregon, and Tacoma, Washington. The original 03s went to Ostrava. I've actually ridden on the real ones quite a lot. They were the first Skoda trams to be built in large numbers, and although they were originally built for Ostrava, they were also built for Pilsen, Brno, and pretty much every Czech city except for Prague. Liberates also never got them. They look very similar. And as you can see, Epping is developed but not super developed here. I have not had amazing luck with Epping. But it's the most successful city on this map in this game. So we make another stop here. These two stops are actually pretty close together. One thing I can do is I can show you the feature I mentioned earlier where you can go inside your vehicles if you use the camera tools. You move the camera in this way, the way you would do if you were moving around the map, actually. It's so obvious, it's not obvious. So here we are inside the Skoda. And this is actually not horribly inaccurate, actually. It's not very detailed, but they have the grab irons there, and they have the seats aligned exactly as they would be on a real Skoda, or for that matter, a Czech tram generally. This is usually how they're laid out, with the seats up against the sides like that. Relatively close. So basically like a passenger train. There's another Skoda with a little bit of rust on it. And we have another stop to do here. There's the big train station over on the right there. It's the main station for the city, Epping Station. Let's see what else we got here. We have some trucks. This one's an electric truck. I haven't been able to figure out if this is an actual model of electric truck or if it's just kind of a generic that they've introduced for the game. It's not immensely interesting, but it's one of the last vehicles you get because we're now in the electric vehicle era. And here's a more traditional diesel bus that in this case I'm using as a motor coach. So I put motor coach lines in on this map partly as an experiment, but also to fill in gaps where I didn't have an exact direct rail connection. And these lines have been pretty successful, actually. It is possible to set up... Oh, there's one of the elk, the scenery animals, if you missed that. Motor coach lines in Transport Fever 2 can actually be reasonably successful once you have real buses and not stagecoaches. Because they're as fast as a slow train, basically, very slow train. Which is still fast enough sometimes to attract passengers. This bus, of course, is referred to as a streetcar because the manufacturer calls it that. I've never seen one in real life, but it's a very weird thing to call a bus because streetcar in American English means tram. And this bus is not a tram, this bus is a bus. It's not even an electric bus. I like the scenery. I mean, now we've frozen because we're going into autosave, but I like the scenery on this. Like, this does look very much like a rural part of the Czech Republic or Germany, or actually the United States also. At least, say, the Adirondacks, for example. The Adirondacks looks a lot like this, and this road resembles New York State Route 8 to some extent, although obviously in America you have a yellow center line. You don't have a white center line in America. And that's another thing they've gotten wrong in the scenery. When you play an American scenario, they give you the white center line, which is inaccurate. I shouldn't say one of many complaints. I would say one of some complaints I have about this game, that they haven't really simulated America very accurately. You can kind of fake it with the vehicles, but it's still basically fake. Of course, all of this stuff is fake, but you get my point, I guess. But yeah, that's pretty nice scenery, right? It's choppy here. I mean, again, I need more RAM. So, what else are we going to look at here? One of the other motor coaches. This route is really, really slow. In part because we have all these curves and grades and everything. These buses, at least as simulated in Transport Fever 2, don't seem to have a lot of horsepower. They seem to struggle with hills. Let's see what else we got here. Well, I do have some ships in this map, generally for carrying bulk goods. So these are basically bulk freighters, coal and iron. And this was really experimental because I would have been better off with railway lines, actually. But I wanted to try these ships to see if I could actually get anything out of them. And so we have the Uranus there, which I have built in reference to the Jupiter, which was a U.S. Navy collier. This is actually a coal bulk freighter. Not distinctive at all. If you have a ship in Transport Fever 2 that will carry one bulk commodity, it'll basically carry anything. So, the Uranus doesn't seem to be going anywhere, so we'll look at a different one. This is the same class of ship, but it is actually loaded and on the way to the steel mill, or actually not the steel mill, but rather the freight station that I set up to pick up the bulk commodities and ship them to the steel mill, more accurately. That is something you can do. You can use a freight station as a distribution point in Transport Fever 2. It's a very nice, realistic feature. And some people will build entire freight yards, actually, so that they basically organize their logistics in the real-life way. I don't do that so much because one of the unrealistic things about Transport Fever 2 is that you very rarely have industries in cities. So you have the industries out in the middle of nowhere, you have the mines and so on out in the middle of nowhere, and usually the next step is go straight to the city. So the idea of having these central distribution points where you can accumulate a large amount of goods, for example, or finished products, and then ship them in much larger trains than are really available in Transport Fever doesn't make as much sense as it would make in real life. But some people do that. It's not impossible. I just don't see as much advantages in real life. But you can use stations as distribution points or as transshipment points. I guess in this case this would be more of a transshipment station. But you can see the graphics in this are pretty good. I'm inside the bridge here of the ship. And it's decent graphics considering that it's interior graphics that aren't really meant to be used as such. And so this bulk freighter is almost at its destination. And when it gets to the docks there, it'll unload. And when a freight train shows up, it will transship the freight to the freight train, and the freight train will go to the steel mill. So I was kind of proud of this setup here, even though it was actually unnecessary. Like I said, I would have been better off just building a railway line. Then what else have we got here? Well, we can look at one of the local trains, maybe. Maybe. Yeah, we'll go with this one. The train is basically one of SBB or Swiss Railway's most basic commuter trains for local services. It's your most basic bi-level in Transport Fever. The real-life trains are anything but distinguished or special, but they are practical. They can only go 140 kilometers per hour, and in this case I have the wooden ties on this railway line, so I can only go 120 with it. but it's a local. It doesn't really need to go very fast. It can't really go very fast if it has a lot of stops on the route. The only reason that this one can go the full 120 is that it has this long empty section of tunnel here with no stops. This is basically a branch line that's developed into a 2-track line because my traffic has gotten to such an extent that I need 2 tracks. And this tunnel is very, very, very long. I built it after I had adequate capital to do stuff like this. You don't want to do a lot of tunnels early in the game because it just costs too much money. This is cool though. If you leave the train when it's in a tunnel, it follows the land over the tunnel. So we get to see all the forest scenery here. I think this is cool. I mean, of course, these graphics are not the greatest in the industry, and you add to that the fact that I've had the graphics settings turned way down on this, so that I can actually make this video at all. But it's still nice. So there's our Swiss commuter train again. Technically an RE 450 class of the SBB. And we are arriving in Weatherby. But I think that's about all I have for you. I mean, I think you get the point. We'll try the real playthrough now. So, this is the official playthrough, or what's going to be my official playthrough for Transport Fever 2. So we have the introduction to the May update there. And as with the other playthroughs, I think I'm going to just do the free game. And so we'll load that up. And we have a lot of choices for how to configure the maps. We have the tropical climate option, which is new, and it's on the dry option now. Instead of having European and American, of course, now it's about climates very much so. The temperate climate actually produces less bodies of water than the dry one, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there we go. You could say it's a different seed, but if you look down in the lower left, it's not. It's uppercase Y, lowercase e, lowercase z in this case. And you get different quantities of water with different climates, and it doesn't necessarily make sense in the case of the dry and the temperate. The tropical gives you sort of an island biome. You can fiddle with that, obviously, but basically the assumption is you're somewhere out in the Pacific or in the Caribbean or somewhere. And there are various ways to fiddle with that. Part of the advantage of the tropical biome is that you can do a lot more with boats. But I haven't tried it yet, weirdly enough. Other than in the campaign scenario for Java. Anyway, I'm going to go with the temperate. It fits the buildings the best, and I'm going to also go with the European vehicles when I have those in a second. I'll go with medium towns, medium industries, the large map size and not the very large map size, because I don't want to overload my computer. And we'll go to next. So we have European vehicles. Apparently you can do up to 6 cargo types. This is not advertised for the May update. They only say 4, but actually you can do 6 cargo types in the cities now. In terms of demand, they don't produce cargoes yet. And I'm going to leave the industry closure at rarely and the industry density target at medium. And what else do I have to change here? Well, the start year should be 1850, as it's been with the other playthroughs. And we'll take a look at the custom settings, even though I'm not going to use them. We'll take a look at what you can do. So you have all the add-ons here from the workshop and so on. And I've tried a whole bunch of these. I have them for reasons. I like all of them, pretty much. But I'm not going to use any this time. But there are a lot of choices, and I've only got a fraction of what's available. I think I will do a playthrough in the future with some of these. Some of the ones that I like the best, like the Teak Coach set there, and the Ivid Atlantics, and Sterling Single. And then, of course, there are also the advanced settings. The top ones are actually not advanced, they just are redundant there. Messing around with the finances, I think that's something new, relatively. The town growth, you can adjust what factors influence town growth. I'm going to leave everything at 100%, which really means nothing. For some reason, it jumped me up to 150% investment in vehicles there. Not what I wanted. I want to leave all this default. I'm not even going to use the custom settings anyway at the end of the day. I just wanted to show you what they look like. So, we go back, and I gotta shut the custom settings off so that we're still with the defaults here, more or less. And I can't think of what else. You can see the Asian vehicles up there as a choice. I haven't tried them yet, except for in the campaign scenarios. Will I start? So this is now going to load. I'm going to actually jump ahead so that we can load faster here. In reality, it can take a few minutes to load one of these maps if you don't have a powerful computer. My computer is okay, but even my computer struggles a bit with Transport Fever 2. So here we have the map, and I inevitably have missed the first game day. So I'm on January 2nd, 1850. And I have to find the biggest city to start with. I've gotten in the habit of always checking this at the start of a game to have some idea where I'd make the most passenger revenue. So Alnwick is my largest city, and Alnwick is... looks like it's up there on the left there. Yes, that's it. And it's not very large yet, but that's because I'm still in game year 1850. The Parkview Hotel there, which of course reappears many places throughout any Transport Fever 2 map. I think they could diversify the city buildings a little bit if they put their minds to it, but you know, they have various priorities. One of the things I've found about Transport Fever, at least Transport Fever 2, is that even though it wasn't originally designed to feature freight transport in the early parts of the game is a better way to make quick money, which is not what every tips video on YouTube will tell you. A lot of them will actually tell you to build truck routes initially, which would mean freight, but on a much smaller scale. I've found that if you are using horse-drawn vehicles, that doesn't hold as true, because you end up using up your expense budget before you can ever make any revenue, just because it takes so long for a horse-drawn vehicle to get anywhere. Now what I want to find is a steel mill in close proximity to an iron mine and a coal mine, and preferably a customer also. A steel customer, obviously, because I found that's the best way to make easy money early in the game. You put in 2 freight lines, one for the iron, one for the coal, and then if you have any money left over, whether actual capital or loans, you can do a 3rd railway line to a customer. But sometimes it can be hard to find a good pairing. I think in this case, this steel mill down here is my best bet, because we have a coal mine over on the right there and an iron mine up north. And if I put in a station, freight station, on the access road for the steel mill here, I can give it 3 platforms, 1 for each service, and I'll have a pretty good start on a freight business. So we'll get the freight station here. Notice, by the way, that it isn't a choice of large, small, and so on. You have to actually put in specifications for your station. So here I'm going for the longest possible platform length of 320 meters, because if I don't put in the longest possible platform length, I will be limited in how fast I can load and unload very long freight trains. So I'm thinking ahead a little bit. This can lose me some money, but as you'll see, my revenue is going to be quite nice, so it will help to make up for that. I have 3 tracks because I'll be having 3 services. serving this, if I have enough money to build them all. In which case, if I don't, I will do 2. There's my steel mill, but it's not producing anything yet or even emitting any smoke, because it will not emit smoke or produce any steel unless it's fed with coal and iron. So I've just renamed my station there to match. Now I need to put in a station for the coal mine. At this point, it's only going to be a single track, and I think I'm going to put it down to below this coal mine here, to the south, basically, in the game terms. That's one of the things I would like to see in Transport Fever is a compass, because without looking at the seed map, it's hard to know like which is north, which is south, and so on, unless you mark it manually. Anyway, I'm going to put this access road around the mine so that the station will more easily get it in its catchment area. This is something you have to be careful of. You have to make sure that when you put in a station, it actually serves what you're trying to do business with, because that is not a completely straightforward thing. It's not entirely even prototypically accurate. If you put a station next to a customer, it doesn't mean anything. You have to have this road access, as you can see, where it highlights the customer in white. And you can see the little blue lines between the station and the access road there that indicate those would be the paths of travel, if you will. Mostly for passengers, but in this case, we don't have any passengers. This will just be coal. Now notice also in the configure menu I'm showing you here, you can put in passenger platforms, you can put in tracks, you can put in passenger buildings. So this could be a both passenger and freight station if I wanted it to be. There are all kinds of mods you can add, and of course the nice thing about the buildings nowadays is that they will now hold extra cargo for you if your platforms overflow, which is a functionality that didn't exist before the May update. So that's nice, but I'm not going to actually put anything more in on this station because I don't expect it to overload immediately. And once it starts to, I'm going to hopefully have enough capital by that point to make the train longer. Okay, so I'll put in my first railway line here between the coal mine and the steel mill. And the map controls here are fighting me, but if I hook it up there, I get a perfect 120 kilometer per hour line there, which is much faster than I need, much smoother than I need. And now I will do the iron mine. So I think again I'm going to extend the access road to where it's in a more convenient location for me, so that I can put the station over there on the right there. And so, get the road tool, and I'll put in the road. Not completely sure how much I should stretch this. I think I will stretch it a bit. It's tricky when you have the roads this close to a customer, but then if I put the road in here, well, it doesn't connect so much with the iron mine, but it's close enough to the road that does that it doesn't matter. I can just put in my freight station. I'm using the M and N keys to rotate, by the way. That's not always obvious. So the M and N keys to rotate, place the station with one track, 320 meter long platform, and now I'm going to put in the track. This is going to be a little bit tricky because I'm not going to be able to get a direct shot at my steel mill station. I don't think. Let's try it anyway. Yeah, that's not going to work. So I need to bring it up close to the... No, that's not going to work either. I got to bring it up close to the steel mill one way or another, and then do a sharp curve. So put in this section, which is actually 120k. Pretty smooth. And that might actually do it. It's a tight curve, it's slower than 120k, but these trains are going to be so slow it's not going to matter, since the only locomotive available is the Spanish Brotliebahn locomotive, just like in Transport Fever 1 and Train Fever. So, the next logical step would be to use this goods factory over here as the customer. It doesn't mean it's going to be able to produce goods because it also needs plastics and chemicals, or I think officially that purple Lego indicates chemicals. I don't have a chemical factory ready to go, so for the moment I'm going to just make money off shipping steel to it, even if I can't make money by shipping goods out. And that's something I often have settled for in Transport Fever. Sometimes you can't find a final customer, but you can still make money anyway by delivering raw materials. Now I need a depot here. I'm putting the depot in because I need to build my trains. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get sort of clever, or try to be sort of clever, and have this one depot fork out to all three of those platforms so that there doesn't have to be any crossover at all and any traffic conflicts. I think I'll call this the Earl Shildon Steelworks Shed, because there could easily end up being another shed or works for Earl Shildon, the town. So if I put in tracks, let's see how that's going to go. That's not working well. Let's see. Yes. Okay, I think I'm going to get rid of that tunnel. I don't like that. No, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, see, that's not going to work because generally you want to do junctions above ground. You can do them in a tunnel, but it's much trickier, just like it would be trickier in real life. Just better to have, like, the ground clear. So I'm going to get rid of this tunnel with the bulldozer tool. If this will cooperate with me. Yeah, I'm getting refunds. I was worried about that. I'm bulldozing trees instead of the tunnel. What am I going to do? Back here? No? Yes? No? Does that work? Guess it worked. Yeah, okay, I'm going to... Oh, no, wait. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, that's going to work. Okay, so I'm going to make this a cut. It's not going to be a tunnel. So you put in the no tunnel option there, which basically just means a cut. And then we have our cut. The cuts, weirdly enough, are more expensive in Transport Fever than the tunnels. I don't know if that's really true to life, but in this case, cuts and fills are more expensive than tunnels. Alright, so I now have to connect the other two platforms here other than the coal platform. We'll see how this goes. See if it'll work. It'll take more than... Yeah, it's going to take me more than one try on this. Let's see. Stretch that line and then try to put in the switch. Let's see. Yeah, that's much better. Okay. So there we have our cut, we have our throat, and I guess we're ready to signal. I almost forgot the signal. Okay, so we will now want to build trains for this and then save, because I do not trust that I'm going to do all right with the steel train. But let's try the coal train and the iron train first. So Spanish Bartley-bound locomotive is the only locomotive available, so that will be the locomotive. So you have to add, and then I'll use these gondolas because they're the only coal cars available. I'll put 8 of them on, which has already exhausted my budget. I don't want to cut the train length, so I think I will take a loan already. I did run out of money, as it turns out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I need one more. Now we can afford it because we borrowed the money. It says mediocre in terms of the power to weight ratio, which is a nice feature. But mediocre is actually acceptable. Mediocre just means the train will be slow and it'll have trouble climbing grades. But it will still work with a mediocre power to weight ratio. I'm not asking it to do anything too demanding anyway. So we have a new line. The new line will run from the coal mine to the steel mill. Now, of course, you have the option here of alternate platforms. I'll show you that in a minute. But for the now, we're going to want to load, full load, give it a 5-minute maximum stop time so that it will have time to load. Then make sure it only loads coal, so it's not loading some overflow from somewhere else. I found that sometimes a problem. That's why they have this specific feature now, to force the train to carry what you want it to carry. I can't actually do the alternate platforms, as you can see, because I don't have any crossovers. Which is kind of intentional, because I just don't want conflicts between the trains. I'll change this to Earl Shilton Coal Train instead of simply Line 1. And now we'll build the iron ore train. So again, the only choice is the Spanish partly bound locomotive. The only gondolas available are these. And I've already run out of money again, so I need another loan. Eight cars. Buy. Now we need to put in a line from the iron ore mine to the steelworks. And let's see how I'm going to manage this. I think it'll choose the platform automatically because that's the only way it can go. So then I will specify a full load, 5-minute wait time at most. Demand that it only load iron ore. Demand that it only unload at the steel mill, meaning that just like the coal train, it's going to have an empty run. In the perfect world, you wouldn't have empty runs of trains, but in this case, I only have one type of rolling stock, and I don't have a return load of freight. There's no demand for steel up there at the iron mine, so now I guess I have to consider whether I'm going to build anything else. And I think that the steel run would be the best. I mean, if I wanted to run a goods train from the goods factory eventually, I could go up to Deal, if that's the right way to pronounce the name of that town. Because I could cross the river and go up the west bank of it. The west shore of it, as the New York Central would say. But at the moment, I think the most ambitious thing I can think about is a steel train. So, is that a good investment or not? I guess I'm going to do it. The more revenue I can rake in, the better, probably. So I'll do my save to be on the safe side, as I already said I would do. The 12th game I'll add for playthrough. As of taking this footage, it is the 14th of May, 2022. We'll save it. Probably by the time this gets uploaded to YouTube, it will be a number of days or weeks in the future after I put all the pieces together, do all the editing, and so on in my free time. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have to think of here. I think I can just save. What am I not thinking of? I mean, actually, you can see some of the other details there, the campaigns and so on. But you're not interested in that. So we will just get to building this steel train route here. I have another tip up there. I don't really have enough money to do this. I'm going to have to take out another loan, but I probably have enough money for the track at least. So if I put in the track, I at least have enough money for the track. So I'll put in the station first up here. Again, it will be a single track freight station with the maximum platform length. And I'll see how I can fit it in there to make that curve out to the south a little bit easier. I can... yeah, I'm not going to rotate that further. Okay, so I put in a curve to exit. And now I'm going to have to figure out the cheapest way to build this line, because this terrain is actually pretty hilly. You can see it's largely in a tunnel. We're going to have to take a look at how long that tunnel's going to be, because I'm not optimistic. Yeah, almost the whole line is in a tunnel, which I don't want at this stage in the game. I don't have enough money for that. So, I think I'm going to hug the existing line coming from the coal mine, but I have to get down to the coal mine first. So instead, I'm going to hug the mountain on the way there. Contour map here shows that if we go this way, we're still going to be going upgrade. But it's not as radical as if we go over to the right there. You can kind of see just visually that there's a hump sort of straight ahead of where we are here. And if I go to the left, I can sort of skirt around it. I'll still have a heavy grade here, but it's not going to be as expensive to build. I'm going to go with a cut, even though the cut's more expensive, because I don't like the idea of doing a tunnel in this situation. It just seems wrong to me, and I don't have enough money anyway, so give it up for now, get the loan I was planning on. Let's try this again. I can't actually make it a steeper grade, even though I kind of wanted to. So we'll make it a cut and then see where we can go from here. Yeah, it is a pretty deep cut, but it's just makes more sense than doing a tunnel. I just hate the idea of doing a tunnel in that situation. Okay, so I'll make this another cut. And now the question is the best way to meet that coal line there. If I go this way, I get a bridge, which I don't want. If I go... oh, that's crazy. I don't want that. If I do a direct connection, that almost does it. Except these lines, the coal line and the steel line, are uneven then. And if I want to make this a main line in the future, that's not what I want. So thinking ahead, I shouldn't actually build it this way, even though building it to perfectly hug the coal line is going to make the grade even harder. The thing is, the steel train's not going to be as long anyway, because, as you'll see, it takes 2 pallets of iron ore and 2 pallets of coal to produce 1 pallet of steel. So I can have an 8-car iron ore train, an 8-car coal train, but a 4-car steel train. And that will be much easier to get up a grade than a larger train. Alright, so my steel mill to goods factory route is complete. Now we got to build the steel train. And steel in the Transport Fever universe is always transported on flat cars with side stakes. So I will put 4 of these on, as I said I would do, and I already need another loan. Alright, so we build that. And we will need a new line. So this will actually go from the steel mill to the outlying destination. I don't like the name Earl Shilton Halt, so I will change that to Earl Shilton Goods in a minute. Now, does that line... yeah, I wanted to make sure that line was going where I wanted it to, but it really doesn't have any place else to go, because I deliberately designed the line that way. Again, I'll go with the 5-minute wait. It might even benefit from more than that, but I will do the 5-minute wait for now. I'll make sure it only loads steel, and that it only unloads at the goods factory. Yes, the station name. I don't like Earl Shilton Halt. I want Earl Shilton Goods. That's one of the nice features of Transport Fever 2, is that you can change names in all of these menus, pretty much. I should also rename the line, speaking of that. Earl Shilton Steel Train. And after all this, it may be time to finally run some trains. But I need to save first in case this all ends up being a disaster. So we will save the game. 12th game for playthrough, part 2. 14th of May, 2022. Let it save. Now we go back to the depot or the shed or what have you back here. Now one of the things you can do is you can speed up or slow down your dates. That's something I learned from one of the other YouTubers recently, but although this can make it more or less realistic, it also makes it non-standard because it was always intended that the timescale would not be real time. Now the game speed can be adjusted over here, which is a feature that goes back to Train Fever. I may use a faster speed for it while this empty coal train is getting into position, but I think I will go with a real-time speed at first, just so that you see how it works. I want to show you a few things. Okay, so we go with the real-time standard speed. I shouldn't even say real-time speed. I should say standard speed. It's not real-time at all. It's not even close. So we'll go with the standard speed, and Spanish Bartley-bound locomotive is pulling out of the depot and is heading for the coal mine. Now if you look down at the bottom of the screen, it says that it's going to the steel mill. That's because it will make sort of a dummy stop in the steel mill as if it's doing its normal run before continuing to the coal mine. Our signal is high green because there's nothing on the line yet. We are the first train to ever use this line. And when the iron ore train pulls out behind us, it will stop at the signal until we are clear. We use the external view here. You can use the arrow keys or the letter keys or your mouse wheel held down and the mouse moved around. You can move your view around in various ways. Now, of course, I'm going to 4 times speed now so that we don't have to wait this out, because this train is just crawling its way empty to the coal mine. It's not even running revenue yet. It'll make its dummy stop at the steel mill here. Here it goes. And off it goes again for the coal mine. You can see the iron ore train is already pulling in behind it. And the steel train also has the high ball because the ore train is already clear. You can see some of the wildlife there, some of the birds flying there. More of those nice Transport Fever 2 features. So this train looks like it's going a lot faster than it really is. It's really going less than 30 kilometers per hour because of the grade. But I have it on 4 times speed. And as it gets over this hump here in the terrain, it's going very, very, very slowly, and then will eventually roll down. Having a little bit of system freezing here. Not as bad as before because I have a large size instead of a very large size map, and I don't have very much on it yet. Now, because of the time that's passed, there's already more than a full load of coal on the platform, so this train will load up pretty much immediately. Especially because it only has 8 cars on it. That's all I could, as you remember, afford. So I'll take some of this load and bring it back to the steel mill. We're back to standard speed. Train whips around, and off we go. I've got a little bit of choppiness going on there. This train will carry 32 pallets of coal, and it is carrying the full 32 right now. A lot of people say, well, 32 of what? You know, because they don't work in tons in Transport Fever 2. Here I'm messing around with the camera controls that I love so much in Transport Fever 2 versus Transport Fever 1. But in reality, there are a lot of constructs in Transport Fever. So 32 what? Well, 30 just means 32 loads, 32 pallets, basically. And who knows what the weight really is. They don't get into scientific detail in Transport Fever in the way they would in a simulator. Some people call it a business simulator, but it's not really a simulator. It's a very, very nice strategy game that resembles a simulator that I enjoy very much. But in terms of accurate numbers, whether it's speeds, whether it's the passage of time, whether it's acceleration, deceleration, and loadings, all of this is very, very much constructed. Even the passenger capacities on the vehicles are not prototypically accurate. Although, as I've said in past videos, both Transport Fever 1 and Transport Fever 2, as well as Train Fever, all model individual customers, or at least passengers, which I think is really cool. I haven't had a chance to do a walk around with one of those characters in my Transport Fever playthrough, this one, but I do that in Transport Fever 1. And other than the models being different, that aspect of the game is not modeled that differently between Transport Fever 1 and Transport Fever 2. So, the coal train is pulling into the steel mill and is delivering coal. The steel train there seemed to have left prematurely, but it will be back. Now I've frozen again, and it's because of the autosave. So we wait for the autosave to complete so that the train can unload. There we go. And the train is heading back to the coal mine. So where's the iron ore train? The iron ore train is way over here. And it will arrive eventually. It's going the full 40 kilometers per hour here, which is as fast as a Spanish Broadleaf locomotive goes. Feels like it's stalled on a hill, but not yet. It's just that it's a very, very, very slow train. Alright, so it's pulling into the steel mill, and once that iron ore is unloaded, the steel mill will start producing steel. So if we move back, we can see the exhaust coming out of the smokestacks at the mill, and the mill will promptly produce some steel. I was looking for where the steel piles up here, and for some reason I just can't spot it, because these are dummies. These are just scenery here. They aren't actually what's being produced. But eventually that steel is going to pile up on the platform, and the steel train will come and pick it up. So I have to find that steel train. I think I'm going to turn it around, because there's no reason for it to go all the way to the other end of the line before going to pick up its load. So I use the turnaround button there, or the change direction button, the reverse button, whatever you want to call it, in the train menu. And it's heading back the other way. I'll speed up the time to 4 times again to wait till it gets over there. And by the time it arrives in the steel mill, there'll be no question that the steel will be ready to go. It can only carry 16 pallets of steel or lumber or whatever commodity. So we'll slow down to normal speed again, get into position to watch the train load up these pallets of steel here. And the steel mill has already run out of coal and iron ore, so this will be all that's available for now. We'll see if it fills the train. Theoretically, it should. And it looks like it has, but it has not. It's missing 1 pallet. One thing about cargo and passengers in Transport Fever and Transport Fever 2 is that you can lose it if you wait too long. But I don't know if that's the case here, because I think we've been pretty prompt, actually. But I guess some technical glitches prevented us getting the full 16 pallets of steel. It might be because it's not gotten exactly 32 iron and 32 coal. That could be it. But in any case, here's another coal train, with the same coal train doing another load. That still doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily get any more steel, because we don't know whether it's short of iron or short of steel or short of neither. You can see the ore train coming over there. I've of course sped up the time to 4 times again, so we don't have to wait forever. So it looks like it's zooming along at relatively modern speeds, even though it's not. So you can see the performance of the factory here. 2 iron ore pallets and 2 coal pallets equals 1 steel pallet. You can see the production, you can see the shipment, and then the transport indicates what's actually been picked up. And sure enough, all we needed was 1 pallet of steel, so our steel train is on the way to the goods factory. So back to normal speed, and I will ride along with the steel train. And it's struggling a little bit to get up the grade. It's an already slow and weak locomotive, and it's already down to 28 kilometers per hour there. So it's getting really slow. 22. Good, yeah, it's going to go below 20. I was going to say it could go below 20, and sure enough, it looks like it's going below 20. So, slow as molasses here. Once I get more powerful locomotives, this will be less of an issue, even with a longer train. Okay, it's picking it up finally, getting over the hump here. 18, 19. Twenty again. .30 km/h, so we're sort of back in business. The very low standard for speed of the Spanish Brotliebahn. Now, if we look at the aerial view here, that goods factory isn't producing anything yet, and the reason is that even if we deliver the steel, it's not going to be able to produce any steel without also having chemicals, or Legos or plastic or whatever you want to call that cargo. And for the moment, I don't have the capital to put in a railway line to bring that in, so this is going to be only profit from delivering the steel. Got choppy graphics here again. But we will make some money off that. They do allow you to do that. So, after this choppiness, breaks free, the train pulls in, it unloads, and heads back to the steel mill. So now all three trains are profitable, and the company is in profit in only the second fiscal year, which in Transport Fever 2, in my experience, is kind of hard to achieve. However, it doesn't seem to be particularly sustainable, and I still would like to lengthen the lengths of these trains. So once that autosave completes, I'm going to see if I can raise enough money to lengthen the trains, because as things are, I'm breaking even with a modest profit, but I'm not making enough money to really finance further development. And you can say, well, get loans. I already am at 9 million in debt, and in this stage of the game, prior to 1900, you're only allowed 10 million in debt. So it's much better, especially given interest payments, to find another way to raise the money. And unfortunately, I think the only way to really do that is to wait until the money accumulates. Because I don't think that the profits will drop in such a short time frame. Because I'm only looking at the next maybe 5 game years, and then I probably can make some kind of improvement. Especially because I'm already making a profit. So let's see if that's actually possible to lengthen the trains in the limited time that I have. Since I don't want this playthrough to be a long play, I just want to demonstrate the basics. And I've already shown you the later stage of the game in the mature game part of this video. So the iron shipment is rolling in. Yeah, still in profit. That's nice. So I already have more than a trainload of steel piled up there. So the iron ore gets delivered, which will probably result in even more steel being piled up on the platform. I guess the question is, can I really upgrade that steel train already, even at this stage of the game, so that I'm not losing that steel business? Well, I'm in the third fiscal year here, still in profit, by a wider margin than before. So, especially given that it's the start of the year, what should I really do is the question. That steel train will carry 16 pallets of steel, and it looks like I have far more than that at the steel mill. Let's take a look here. So 16 for each. It's a hard call because the frequency of the steel train is lower, but it's not much lower than the coal and iron trains. I don't have them exactly synchronized, and at the same time I don't have exactly half the frequency for the steel train that I have for the other two. So upping the train to 8 cars is not a good idea, because then it's going to be sitting in the steel mill for more than one cycle of the coal and iron trains. So, yeah, it didn't empty the station, did it? Which was more or less what I was expecting. Maybe after it delivers the steel, I'll lengthen the steel train by 2 cars, not by 4 cars. So I will increase the steel train's capacity by 50%. And that might be the best compromise. Especially because in the short term I'm going to have a backlog. So you might say, why is this going so slow? I have it on 4 times speed right now, if you look down in the lower right. It's just that because we're getting the bird's eye view here, everything looks slower. I can still see a whole bunch of freight opportunities up there up in the north, but again, no capital, right? And no real capacity to take out the loans I need. Still in profit, more or less. And far better than the previous fiscal year, as I said. And we've got our steel delivery already completed now. So, it's a little bit of a hard call whether I should add those steel cars. But we have so much of a backlog here. We have 31, like almost 2 train loads worth of steel waiting at the steel mill station. So it would be stupid not to increase the capacity of this train at least a little. So I'll go with my original plan of a 50% increase. So I'll add 2 flat cars with stakes, which will not even clear that load in the station, but will be affordable without a loan and will enable me to at least carry more and make more money with this train. We're back on 4 times speed, of course, even though this whole thing looks very, very slow. When the steel train does its return trip, notice it's very slow because of that grade that I mentioned while constructing the line. This is where a more powerful locomotive would certainly be very useful. Yeah, and the last year was unprofitable because the capital investments are subtracted from the profit. So it's loaded completely at least. Potentially that train could now make more money. It only added 2 cars and it has still only 1 locomotive. So, let's see. It certainly seems slow, doesn't it? But it's 4 times speed. Okay, there it goes into the goods factory. And it doesn't seem like my balance went up. I don't know what's up with that. Let's see. Well, some profit there, not as much as I was hoping for. I wonder what the macro looks like. As in the whole company. Oh, there we go. Alright, so it's back in profit again. Not a huge profit, but more profit than in 1851. We're in a new fiscal year now, 1854, when we're out of profit, but then immediately we're more in profit than we were at the end of 1853. So, that's pretty good. This is much better than I've achieved with most of my Transport Fever games at this early stage, and I think I have to attribute that to the freight first priority. I still think this is one of the best ways to get a game started, even if that was never the original plan of Urban Games for this game. I think maybe this is a logical place to stop, and maybe do a long play in the future, but you get the idea. I guess I'll save this. Yeah. All the trains are profitable. Yeah, so it's success. So I guess I will save this. And maybe this will become the beginning of a long play, maybe it won't. I can't decide really. But obviously, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.